Chapter 2. I'm telling you, I said, turning the smooth, egg-shaped azure gemstone in my fingers. Faint etchings of intricate glyphs caught the low light of the fireplace. There's something weird going on. This is the second one. Slow, rolling thunder shook the rough-hewn walls of the inn's common room. The pelting of the rain ebbed and flowed with the wind, sometimes drowned out by the shuffle and clink of the Count's fresh crop of bodyguards taking their meal, and then drowning them out in turn. The inn was empty, save for us, though I had no idea if that meant the Count's goons had simply kicked everyone else out into the storm when we'd arrived. We were frustrated, even the newcomers, and they'd only rendezvoused with Grandesian and I the day before. We'd reached the edge of the city after midnight, but the weather had won out, finally intensifying to the point that the scant few miles between us and home had become insurmountable in the dark. We'd settled for beers, brooding, and bed, but I had an issue to raise. Grandesian scoffed, rolling his eyes at me across the table. I fantasized about smacking him again, but held off. Doing so in public would compel him to have me dragged off in irons, and the new guards hadn't scared themselves useless with speculation over my mysterious and dreadful Endmage powers yet. None of said powers would have prevented a platoon of burly gentlemen from pummeling me into a pulp, but I'd let the last group think whatever they wanted. No reason to change course now. "The Magus is dead," the Count said. "Your contract is over. Don't try to persuade me to keep you on retainer." As if all the gold in the north could have convinced me to continue that relationship a minute longer than necessary. "Look at it," I told him, holding up the gem. It was inert in my hands, but the Count must have had enough tutoring to recognize it as some kind of magical focus. "These are sophisticated glyphs. Complicated. Remember the sisters last year, out west? They had one just like it. I didn't think much of it at the time. I fail to see why you're thinking so much of it now." "Because," I said, trying not to sound exasperated, "I think it's strange, Count, how many incidents I've seen in the north lately. Mages this powerful are rare. Mages this powerful who are also homicidal lunatics are even rarer. But ever since the burned one, I've been chasing down a half-dozen a year." "You're not honestly suggesting a connection between the Magus and the burned one. That's preposterous. There's no comparison." I was impressed that Count Blowhard was even capable of that level of perspective. His little corner of the freelance had been untouched during the burned one crisis, but the Magus, while in order of magnitude less deadly, had hit the region hard, and Grandesian had almost died rushing in to play the hero. I'd expected the self-centered twit to consider that more important by far. The only reason this wasn't a disaster is that we stopped the Magus early. He was young. At the rate he was escalating, he could have been just as bad in a year or two. The same with the sisters. The same with Starkiller back in West Banner. And the Darkest before her. I've barely been able to keep them contained. Any one of them could have spiraled out of control. I wasn't looking for a common thread before, but I turned the stone around one last time, then tucked it away in my travel cloak. I'm worried about what I may have missed. "And what does that little bauble do, exactly?" Grandesian mumbled into his mug, barely looking up. "It looks like any other wizard's trinket to me." "I'm not sure," I admitted, not bothering to correct him. Technically, the Magus had been a warlock, not a wizard, but I didn't think the Count would appreciate the distinction. Hardly mattered. I was wondering if someone in the Arcanium here could take a look. "I'm to pull my scholars from their duties to pursue some freak's pet theory?" He rolled his eyes again. "I imagine they'd rather study you, Endmage. Maybe cut you open, see how you work your little tricks." I mentally rehearsed the motions it would take for me to get my boot knife and bury it in his throat. 2 seconds tops, but then the guards would be on me. The Count snickered, not looking up from his tankard, oblivious to my calculations. "I want you gone, you aberration. You'll not take one step further in my city tonight. You're to be well clear by morning, or perhaps you really will be visiting the Arcanium." I sighed. I should have known. His crisis was ended, and he didn't appreciate the suggestion that there might be another looming. And he probably didn't want me telling anyone about his performance in the Magus lair, come to think of it. "Look, sir," I implored, making a last-ditch effort. "I am the ranking expert on these sorts of problems, and I'm telling you, this isn't finished. There have been too many incidents to explain by pure chance, and there shouldn't be any commonalities between them scattered across, what, 3 years and half the continent? But there's this." I tapped the pocket that held the gem. "Maybe it drives them mad. Maybe it amplifies their power. Maybe it's a popular paperweight among megalomaniacal assholes. I don't know. But gods and furies, I want to find out." Grandesian didn't even pretend to humor me. His air of indifference broke, replaced by a simmering, indignant fury. "I've heard enough," he snapped, nodding to one of his men. "Let's put an end to this business, and I'll be rid of you." Blackened furies, spare me from the egos of the privileged. Fine, I'd get my answers elsewhere. The pouch clattered to the tabletop between us. I didn't even have to open it to know it wasn't my complete fee. I'd been screwed enough times to notice how lean it looked. "We agreed upon 250, I said, leaving the "you pompous dolt" as an unspoken subtext. He sneered. "You will take what I offer and be thankful for the generosity." I blinked, surprised. Now he grows some balls. "And what, exactly, was it about single-handedly slaying the most dangerous mage this region has seen in the past century that you feel warrants a discount?" "You allowed a dozen of my finest men to die at the hands of talons," I corrected. He seemed startled at the very concept of being interrupted. "You insolent, I ought to—" I pinched the bridge of my nose. My head was starting to hurt. Someday, I wasn't going to have to deal with thrice-damned nitwits like the Count anymore. But that got a lot farther away every time one of the bastards stiffed me for a job. "Look, Chief," I said, cutting off whatever self-aggrandizing tangent the Count had been rambling his way through. "I'm sure the punishment for interrupting, reneging charlatans in this parts is quite dire, but, well, fuck it. I'm tired." He looked ready to skewer me. Probably would have if he'd had a better idea what I could and couldn't do. And I didn't want to push my luck. Time to play the Wrath of the Big Bad Endmage card and get out of town while my head was still attached. "You came to me with a problem. I solved it as stipulated. If that still wasn't to your liking, then go fuck a fury. You can handle the next one yourself, and as I was endeavoring to explain, there will be a next one. Too bad for you. Maybe you can hire a different Endmage. I've never met another one, but hells, you're a powerful guy. Maybe you'll have better luck. But you will damn well settle your account with me before either of us can finally be rid of the other." He practically snarled. "I have seen fit to deduct the bereavement pay for my fallen soldiers' families from your exorbitant price, as you utterly failed to safeguard their lives." Foam sloshed out of his cup as he clenched down on it, hand trembling with rage. He held back, though. Despite all his indignation and ego, he remembered the Magus's lair, too. One of us had killed a nightmare. The other one had cried. I fixed him with my best "about to end another mage" glare and rose to my feet, leaning towards him until my aura would be causing extreme discomfort. Deserved or not, the Count had a significant gift for the arcane. He might have qualified as a royal battle mage or a sanctioned wizard had he been born in one of the kingdoms instead of this backwater scrap of the freelands. Disrupting his connection to the ether would feel like his world turning inside out, disconcerting and disturbing, even bordering on true pain. The Count squirmed, looking like he might be ill, but clenched his jaw in defiance. "You listen to me, you grandstanding son of a bitch," I growled, low enough that only he could hear. "You know goddamned well who got your men killed. This was not my first pony ride, although obviously the same cannot be said for everyone at this table." I eased back, and the Count looked as if I was lifting a weight off his chest, inch by inch. "Now," I continued, "you're going to pay me what we agreed upon. I don't much care what happens after that. You can tell all the good folk in the land what a horrid monster the Endmage was, and how you bravely soldiered on to save the day. I do not care. I doubt I'll ever feel the urge to revisit this muck-wallowing shithole you're so intent on ruling. At this point, when you have another Magus pop up and bite you in the ass, it's your fucking problem. Because not only are you a petulant little brat of a man, you're a blubbering liability. But I will leave here with the payment promised me." I stood tall and crossed my arms, letting the flickering light of the fire draw out the shadows on my face, fracturing along the ridges and valleys of my old scars. Is that perfectly clear, Count Grindesian? I almost had the bastard. He was frozen, staring up at me, every whispered rumor and half-forgotten Endmage myth playing through his head, no doubt punctuated by the memory of the Magus's undignified dying screams, and the thought of that great grim specter of doom rotting alone on the floor of a forgotten ruin 2 days' ride from us. Then one of the guards sitting behind me sneezed. I flinched in surprise. Not much, but enough. The illusion cracked and a slow smirk slithered onto the Count's lips. "No, freak. I like my math. and I think I'd prefer it if you left tonight after all." I managed to tuck into a roll as the Count's men hurled me out of the tavern, absorbing most of the impact. Unfortunately, there exists no method of landing that can spare one from the mud. I was covered, and the slop had gotten nice and cold by that time of the night. Lovely. Lucky for me, the also freezing rain was coming down in buckets, and I felt assured that the mud would seed to itself in moments. Just lovely. The Count's 2 lean coin purse bounced off my chest and splashed down beside me. I grunted in mild surprise. I'd given myself 50-50 odds of walking away empty-handed once things had gone sideways. I supposed Grindezian didn't want his men starting rumors of their own. 2 survivors walked away from the Magus after all. It made a better story if I took my abbreviated payment for the families and slunk off into the night, rather than being stiffed and driven out under suspicious circumstances. That would make it seem like the Count had something to hide. Which of course he did, but whatever. Gift horses, mouths, and better places to be. I snatched the purse up, along with my traveling bag, which a thoughtful guardsman had been kind enough to untie before hurling it into the road after me. I grumbled as I cast about for my muddy possessions. Worth a shot, I suppose. I cursed, strapping my bag on once I had stuffed it with everything I could find, the partial payment tucked away securely. A chill that had nothing to do with the cold swept over me, and I tensed. There's only a narrow swath of the immaterial spectrum that's able to make itself felt through my aura, and I've learned the value of extreme caution, coupled with rapid retreat, whenever anything fitting that description crops up. Problem was, I wasn't sure where it had come from. I glanced fervently around, trying to figure out the source of the creepiness so I could hightail it the other way. See, usually the thing to do is to watch the crowd and see what they're fleeing from, or what's snacking on them. But there, in the dead of night, in a miserably cold thunderstorm, I was the only one fool enough to have been tossed out of shelter. I glimpsed a dark rider ghosting down a cross street a block over. That was a good bet. On principle, dark riders should typically be avoided after dusk. I started away from said rider, feeling confident in my tactical thinking, only to spot a hunched form limping down the road from the opposite direction. Voluminous robes obscured all detail, save a walking cane the figure leaned on heavily. Could have just been a beggar, I realize, but thrice damned if I was going to stick around to find out. Obscured, mysterious, shambling robed figures rank right up there with dark riders on the list of things to avoid on dark and stormy nights, whether or not potent magical creepiness is afoot. That's just basic Endmaging. I decided to take my chances with the Dark Riders direction after all. They were probably long gone by then anyway. Evil riders move faster than evil shamblers. I turned to find a carriage barreling down on me. I dove to the side of the road, and I swear I felt the lead horse's hoof catch the hem of my pant leg. I sprawled into the mud again, spewing curses in the name of every god, fury, and possessed rock I could think of. Out of imminent danger, I got a look at the carriage. Coach? Didn't matter. 6 snarling, maddened stallions pulled it, whipped on by some twisted figure whose details I couldn't make out. The bodywork was black and glossy, with thin silver filigree accenting a few key edges. A lone, low-burning lantern bobbed wildly on a single hook, casting insane patterns in the downpour. It clattered to a stop in front of the tavern I'd been ejected from, the coachman halting the team with an eerie, guttural howl. Its door swung open. 2 robed and hooded figures stepped down. Robes and hoods seemed to be in fashion tonight, though, granted, it was raining like the hells. I was beginning to shiver. The first figure, short enough for me to think of as a child, stomped implacably toward the tavern. The second figure, tall and lean, followed for a few steps, but paused mid-stride. Its hooded gaze swept the street, locking onto me with a predatory intensity. I must have looked like a mess, wallowing in my second mud bath in 2 minutes, my typically unkempt mop of sandy hair plastered to my skull, and my bag half-propping me up. The tall figure's gaze pierced into me, seemingly forever, and I didn't dare breathe. The same sensation washed over me again, like frozen spiders marching through my guts and up my spine. A barked word from the smaller one mercifully snapped that gaze off of me, and they both proceeded inside. Dread rose like bile in the back of my throat. I scrambled to my feet, cinched up my pack, and ran.
This is C.D. Corrigan. You may know me from the channel, or from my other Houndsong Games work, Sea of Cinders and relictrpg. What you just heard is an excerpt from my first novel, Tattered Pawns, narrated by the incredibly talented Nick Mercer. I decided years ago to write this series whether or not anyone ever read it, and the initial response has been incredible and humbling. My editor, T.C. Tunstall, and I have already begun work on the next book in the series, plus some spin-off shorter material. And if you've been following along with the development of relictrpg, you'll notice a good bit of the book's DNA in that project as well, including the ability to play as an Endmage and several other game features inspired by the novel's setting. Tattered Pawns launched in October and is available worldwide in paperback, hardcover, and ebook formats. As I record this, the audiobook is complete and processing, and we expect it to go live on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes by January 7th, 2023, if not sooner. Nick is available for narration and voice work, and I've included his information below with my heartfelt recommendation.